The homeless man she sheltered turned out to be the millionaire who destroyed her family. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. It was raining hard that night, the kind of rain that turned the streets into mirrors and made the whole town sound like it was breathing through static. The neon sign outside a small cafe flickered in and out, casting pale light through the window where Lena Brooks sat, her hands wrapped around a chipped coffee cup. She had been there for almost an hour, waiting for a man named Kevin, a blind date set up by her friend Jenny, who swore this one would be different. But every time the door opened, it was someone else. The place smelled like roasted beans and rain-soaked coats, and her reflection in the glass looked as tired as she felt. Lena glanced at her phone again. No messages. She sighed, muttering under her breath. Of course, another no-show. At the next table, a man sat alone. Dark hair, navy suit, no ring. He was reading something on his tablet, shoulders relaxed but eyes sharp, the kind of man who did not wait for anyone. For a moment, Lena thought maybe he was Kevin. Her heart gave a tiny foolish flutter. She checked the note Jenny had texted Table 7. She looked around. Table 7. That was him. Trying to summon courage, she stood up, smoothed the hem of her thrift store dress, and walked over. Hi, she said, forcing a smile. You must be Kevin. I am so sorry I'm late. The man looked up surprised. There was a pause long enough for her to notice the faint scar near his jaw, and the way his gray eyes softened as they met hers. Ah yes, he said slowly. Hi, Lena. Please sit. He could have corrected her, but he did not. Something in her voice, or maybe the loneliness behind her smile, made him play along. She sat down, heart pounding. I am really not great at this whole blind date thing, she admitted. Jenny told me you are quiet, which is good because I talk too much when I am nervous. He gave a small laugh, the kind that sounds like it has not been used in a while. Quiet, huh? I guess she is right. They talked awkwardly at first, then easier. She told him about teaching art to kids, about how she dreamed of opening her own studio someday. He listened, really listened, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and even. I work in tech, he said, mostly management. Nothing exciting. That was a lie, of course. His name was Evan Hartwell, CEO of the Hartwell Group, one of the city's biggest investment firms. But tonight, for the first time in years, he did not want to be a CEO. He just wanted to be a man having coffee with a woman who did not know his name carried power or scandal. Lena laughed when the waiter spilled water between them, laughed when she almost dropped her fork. Evan found himself smiling without meaning to. It had been years since something as small as laughter felt human. When her phone finally buzzed, she glanced at the screen and froze. A message from Jenny popped up. He canceled, girl. Kevin could not make it. Come home. Her breath caught. Wait, you are not, Evan raised a hand gently. No, he said, but I was hoping you would stay anyway. She hesitated, caught between embarrassment and curiosity. Then she smiled. Maybe just for dessert. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, two strangers who should never have met shared a slice of pie in the beginning of something that felt dangerously like fate. If you believe that the smallest mistakes can change everything, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you would have done in Lena's place. Would you have stayed or walked away? Now let us go back to where it all began, with the man who was never meant to be there, and the woman who changed everything without knowing who he truly was. The next morning, the sky was the color of steel. A thin fog hung over the city, and Lena Brooks woke to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. For a moment, she hoped it was a message from the man at the cafe, but the name on the screen pulled her back to reality. It was her landlord. She let it ring out. She already knew what the call meant. Rent was due. Bills were past due. The electric company had already sent 2 warnings. She rubbed her temples and whispered, one more week. Just give me one more week. The apartment was small, barely held together with secondhand furniture and paint that peeled like dry leaves. On the tiny table near the window, her sketchbook lay open. The same page as always, half of a bridge drawn in pencil, reaching toward the empty air. Her father had started teaching her to draw bridges when she was a child. A bridge, he used to say, is the only thing that connects two sides that were never meant to meet. He believed in building things that lasted, until the day his company collapsed under the weight of someone else's greed. The name still made her jaw tighten. Hartwell Group. She poured herself cheap coffee and watched the street below. Come alive delivery trucks, people rushing umbrellas like dark flowers. For a second she wondered where that man from last night was now. Evan, or whoever he really was. She had not even asked for his last name. When she arrived at the community arts center, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The kids ran in laughing, waving brushes dipped in every wrong color. Lena smiled, the kind of tired smile that barely reached her eyes. She taught them how to paint reflections, how to make clouds look soft. It was the one place where she could forget everything else. After class, she found her friend Jenny waiting outside the door holding 2 cups of coffee. So Jenny asked, grin wide, how was Kevin? Lena sighed. Not Kevin. What do you mean, not Kevin? He did not show, but someone else did. I sat at the wrong table. Jenny blinked. Wait, you had dessert with a stranger? Lena laughed despite herself. Apparently. Jenny nudged her arm. Well, maybe that stranger will call. Lena shook her head. He will not, and that is fine. I am done with pretending something good is waiting around the corner. But that night as she walked home, the city lights flickered on in the puddles beneath her feet. A black car slowed near the curb. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a man in a gray suit, familiar eyes calm and focused. Miss Brooks. She froze. Do I know you? He smiled faintly. You did once. At a cafe. Her pulse stuttered. Evan. He nodded. I hope I am not intruding. May I talk to you for a moment? Something in his tone made her hesitate. It was not flirtation, it was business, serious and deliberate. Against her better judgment, she stepped closer. I have a proposition, he said, offering a sleek black envelope. You mentioned you work with children. I run a foundation that funds creative programs. We are looking for an art therapist for a private client. Lena frowned. You run a foundation? Yes, he said carefully. The Hartwell Foundation. Her breath caught. Every muscle in her body went rigid. Hartwell, she repeated, almost choking on the name. As in the Hartwell Group, Evan's expression did not change. It is complicated, he said quietly. But I believe this opportunity could change your life. She stared at the envelope as if it were something toxic. You do not understand, she said, stepping back. Your company destroyed my father. He lost everything because of Hartwell. He nodded slowly, guilt flickering across his face. I know. And that is why I am here. The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. She took another step back, shaking her head. You think you can fix something like that with a job offer? No, he said, voice steady. But maybe with the truth. Before she could respond, he placed the envelope on the hood of the car and stepped away. Read it. If you never want to see me again, I will understand. The car door closed and the sound of rain returned soft, almost forgiving. Lena stood there, heart pounding, the black envelope glistening under the streetlight. Inside, her name was written in precise handwriting. To Lena Brooks, for consideration. She did not open it. Not yet. She just whispered to the empty street, What are you really trying to do, Evan Hartwell? And somewhere inside her, a question began to form, the kind that changes everything. Was last night a coincidence, or the start of something she should never have allowed to happen? Now let us return to the man who had just offered her the one thing she swore she would never take a chance from the very name that ruined her family. The following morning began like any other, but nothing about the air felt ordinary. The black envelope sat on Lena's small table, untouched through the night. She had made coffee twice, poured it down the sink twice, and kept circling the letter as if it were something alive. By noon she gave in. Her hands trembled as she peeled it open. Inside was a single page with a printed offer, an official letter from the Hartwell Foundation. It detailed a short-term contract, 6 months as an art therapist for a private patient, housing and travel included. The pay was 3 times what she made in a year. At the bottom of the page, in small handwriting, one line stood out. You once said, every bridge deserves a second chance. This is yours. She read that line again and again until the words blurred. It was a phrase she had used with her students just last week. He remembered. Her first instinct was to tear it up, but her mother's medical bills sat on the counter, the red stamps bleeding through the envelopes. The fridge was nearly empty. She stared at the letter for a long time before whispering, "One meeting, nothing more." The address led her out of the city, past the industrial district, and into an area where the air smelled like pine and old money. The Hartwell estate rose from the fog like something out of another century. Iron gates, long driveway, a mansion surrounded by manicured gardens that looked untouched by time. A man in uniform opened the door before she could knock. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Hartwell is expecting you." She stepped inside. The air was cool and faintly perfumed, the silence so complete she could hear her own pulse. Paintings lined the hall, oil portraits of stern men with familiar eyes. At the end stood Evan Hartwell, dressed in gray, hands folded behind his back. "Lena," he greeted softly. "Thank you for coming." She wanted to turn around and leave, but pride kept her rooted. "You said this was about work," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "It is," he replied, motioning toward the grand staircase. "My mother is ill. She used to paint before her condition worsened. I believe your work could help her reconnect with her memories." Lena followed him up the stairs, her heels echoing off marble. "Why me?" she asked. "You could hire anyone, someone qualified, someone who does not hate the name Hartwell." He glanced at her, and for the first time his composure cracked. "Because you are the only one who told me the truth to my face." She did not know what to say to that. They reached the top floor. Sunlight streamed through tall windows into a room filled with canvases, half-finished paintings, all signed with the same initials, E.H. For a heartbeat, Lena froze. "You paint? Not anymore," he said quietly. "Those are my mother's. I stopped when I took over the company." A frail woman sat by the window, her hair silver, her gaze vacant. Evan knelt beside her with a gentleness that surprised Lena. "Mother, this is Miss Brooks. She is here to help you paint again." The woman blinked slowly, then smiled faintly. "Henry," she whispered. "You came back." Lena's breath caught in her throat. What did she say? Evan's eyes flickered with discomfort. "She has memory lapses. Sometimes she confuses the past." But the name echoed in Lena's mind. Henry, her father's name. She stepped back, gripping the strap of her bag. "I cannot do this," she said, voice shaking. "Whatever this is, it feels wrong." Evan stood, his tone calm but urgent. "Lena, please. You do not understand. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for help." She looked at him, really looked this time. The polished mask of the CEO was gone. What remained was exhaustion and guilt. "If you agree to the contract," he continued, "you will live here during the program. 6 months, all expenses covered. You can leave any time you want. No conditions." Lena hesitated, torn between anger and something else she could not name. "And what do you get out of this?" He met her eyes. "A chance to make things right." The words lingered in the stillness of the room. She turned toward the window, watching the rain begin again outside. It was softer now, like the city was holding its breath. Maybe it was madness, maybe mercy, but when she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Fine. 6 months. After that, we go back to being strangers." A flicker of relief crossed his face. "Agreed." As she signed the contract, the pen trembled slightly in her hand. Her name looked small against the bold letters of Hartwell Foundation. When she looked up, Evan was watching her with an unreadable expression. Outside, thunder rumbled once more, a quiet warning neither of them noticed. Now let us return to the moment that changed everything, when a deal meant to heal old wounds became the start of something neither of them could control. The days that followed moved slowly, as if the air inside the Hartwell mansion refused to let time pass. Lena's new room was larger than her entire apartment back in the city, but it felt colder. Every surface shone, every corner was silent. Even her own footsteps sounded like they did not belong there. She started her work with Evan's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, each morning after breakfast. The older woman barely spoke, but she seemed calmer when Lena set out the paints and brushes near the window. The first day, she painted nothing but shades of blue. The second day, she began tracing the outline of a bridge. The sight made Lena's chest tighten. Evan watched from the doorway, most days silent and observant. He rarely interrupted, only stepping closer when his mother's hands began to tremble. His tone with her was gentle, his patience endless, and that contrast unsettled Lena more than his reputation ever could. During lunch breaks, they sometimes sat across from each other in the sunroom. The silence between them was not hostile, just heavy with questions neither dared to ask. On the third day, Lena finally spoke. "You do not seem like the kind of man who sits still," she said, keeping her gaze on her tea. He smiled faintly. "I am learning." "Why me?" she asked, again, her voice quieter this time. "There are hundreds of therapists more qualified, because you do not pretend," he said. "You see people as they are. My mother needs that." She looked up, startled by the honesty in his voice. "And what about you? What do you need?" He paused for a long moment. "To stop being who I was." Lena wanted to ask what he meant, but Mrs. Hartwell called from the studio, and the moment passed. That evening, as she cleaned the brushes, she noticed a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. Through the glass, she could see a collection of framed photographs. In one of them, a younger Evan stood beside a man she recognized from newspaper clippings, Victor Hartwell, his brother, the current CEO of the Hartwell Group. They both smiled at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new building. Behind them was the company's slogan, "Building Tomorrow Today." Lena shivered. Her father had used the same slogan once right before the merger that destroyed him. At dinner, she could not keep quiet. "I saw a picture of you and your brother," she said carefully. "You were close." Once Evan's fork paused midway to his plate. Once he said, "What happened?" He exhaled slowly. "He built a bridge on someone else's broken foundation. I let him." His answer made little sense, but the sadness in his eyes stopped her from pushing further. After dinner, Lena returned to her room and found a folder on her desk. Inside were lesson plans for art therapy printed neatly. At the bottom of the last page was a handwritten note. "Thank you for staying." No signature, but she knew the handwriting. That night she could not sleep. She wandered the hallways of the mansion, tracing her fingers along the cold marble walls. The house was too quiet, too watchful. As she turned a corner, she noticed a red light blinking faintly above a doorway. A security camera. She looked up, realizing there were several throughout the hall, every angle covered, every move recorded. Why would someone monitor a house like this? She returned to her room, heart pounding, and drew the curtains shut. From her bed, she could still see the reflection of one of the cameras through the hallway mirror. The next morning, she arrived early to the art room. Mrs. Hartwell was already awake, humming softly as she dipped her brush into paint. She turned toward Lena with a tired smile. "He used to paint here too," the old woman said. "Before the fire." Lena froze. "The fire?" Miss Hartwell nodded slowly. "He never told you the studio burned down years ago." Henry tried to stop it. Lena's breath caught. "Henry?" Mrs. Hartwell's eyes were distant. "Yes, Henry Brooks. Such a kind man." The brush slipped from Lena's hand, clattering against the floor. Evan entered the room at that exact moment, his expression shifting when he saw her face. "Everything all right?" Lena stared at him, trembling. "Why does your mother know my father's name?" He hesitated, the silence stretching between them like a wire pulled too tight. "Lena," he said softly, "some bridges are built on truths you were never meant to find." She stepped back, shaking her head. "What are you talking about?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Please, not here. Not yet." But she could already feel the first crack forming between them, the line where trust began to fracture. Outside, the clouds gathered again, darker than before, as if the storm that had brought them together was waiting for the right moment to return. Now let us return to the man who just reopened the past she spent years trying to forget, and to the secret inside the Hartwell mansion that was about to destroy every piece of peace she thought she had found. The next few days inside the Hartwell mansion felt like walking through fog. Lena kept working with Mrs. Hartwell, but her thoughts never stayed in the room. Every time the older woman said her father's name, it echoed in her mind like a bell she could not unhear. She tried to act normal. She mixed paints, smiled when she had to, but inside she was unraveling. The mansion, once intimidating, now felt claustrophobic. Every hallway, every locked door, whispering secrets she was not supposed to know. Evan became quieter too. He avoided eye contact, spent long hours in his study, and came to the art room only to check on his mother. His silence was not cold. It was heavy, almost guilty. Lena could not stop wondering what truth he was trying to protect. One evening, After Mrs. Hartwell had gone to bed, Lena gathered her courage and walked to the west wing. The hallway there was darker, lined with covered paintings and cabinets filled with old records. At the end, she found a door that looked newer than the rest, secured by a keypad lock. Above it, a faint red light blinked, the same kind she had seen on the cameras. She listened. Faint voices drifted from inside, one of them unmistakably Evan's. "She is starting to ask questions," he said. "We cannot keep her in the dark much longer." Another voice replied, sharper, colder. "You promised to stay away from that family, Evan. If she finds out what really happened to her father, you will lose everything." Lena's breath caught. A soft click echoed and she fled before the door opened. She barely made it back to her room before the footsteps faded down the hall. Her hands were shaking as she closed the door behind her. Later that night, she found a folder left on her desk. No name, no note. Inside were newspaper clippings and court documents, all marked with the same headline, "Hartwell Acquisition under investigation for fraud." She skimmed the pages, her stomach tightening as she read her father's name again and again. It was all there: contracts, forged signatures, and financial transfers. But one thing stood out. The deal had not been signed by Victor Hartwell, the current CEO. It had been signed by Evan. Her vision blurred. The man she had almost started to trust, the man who had looked her in the eyes and said he wanted to make things right, had been the one who destroyed her family. The next morning, she found him in the study surrounded by ledgers and files. "You lied to me," she said, her voice low but shaking. He looked up, startled. "Lena, do not," she said sharply. "Do not say my name like you care. You ruined my father. You ruined everything." He stood slowly, his face pale. "It is not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," she demanded. "Tell me why your mother remembers him. Tell me why his company disappeared the moment yours took over." He hesitated, and that hesitation was all the answer she needed. Lena backed away, tears burning behind her eyes. "You wanted to make things right. Then start by staying out of my life." She turned and walked out before he could stop her. That night, she packed her things. The storm outside was louder than before, lightning flashing through the tall windows as she carried her bag down the stairs. But when she reached the main door, Miss Hartwell's voice stopped her. "Do not leave yet," the older woman whispered from the couch. "He did not want to sign it." Lena froze. "What?" Miss Viz Hartwell smiled, sadly, eyes distant. "It was Victor. Evan tried to stop him. The documents, they were changed after he left the boardroom. He took the blame to protect me." The words hit her like a wave. "That is not possible," she whispered, but the tremor in the woman's voice felt too real. When Lena turned around, Evan was standing at the top of the stairs. He looked tired, drenched in shadow. "She is telling the truth," he said quietly. "I took the fall so he would not destroy what was left of this family." Lena's throat tightened. "And my father? He still died because of what your company did." Evan nodded slowly. "I know. That is what I live with every day." The house fell silent except for the thunder outside. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, he said, "You can go if that is what you need, but before you do, there is something you should see." He held out a folded paper, edges worn, ink smudged from years of handling. "It was your father's last message to me. He asked me to take care of the bridge project. He said it was for his daughter." Lena stared at him, unable to move. "I did not understand it back then," he continued softly, "but I think he meant you." She looked down at the letter, then back at him, torn between rage and disbelief. Outside, thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. Now let us return to the moment when the truth began to surface, and the line between guilt and redemption started to blur, because some bridges are rebuilt, not with forgiveness, but with the courage to face what was broken. Lena did not sleep that night. She sat by the window of the guest room, the letter from her father still open on her lap. The ink had faded with time, but the words were clear enough to sting. He had trusted the Hartwell name. He had believed that partnership meant progress, that a handshake still carried honor. The letter ended with a single sentence written in her father's familiar handwriting. "If anything happens to me, tell Evan that some bridges are worth saving." She read it over and over, her heart pounding louder with each line. Nothing made sense anymore. Her father had known Evan Hartwell and trusted him. By morning, she decided she needed answers, not apologies. She found Evan in the study again, standing by the window as sunlight spilled across stacks of paper. He looked like a man who had not slept either. "Why did my father write to you?" she asked, holding out the letter. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Because he thought I could stop what was coming," he said. "I tried, but Victor had already taken control of the board. The merger was a trap, and your father was the only one who realized it too late." Lena searched his face for lies, but all she saw was exhaustion. "Why did you not tell me this from the beginning? Would you have believed me?" She wanted to say no, but her voice would not come. Evan walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs, reports, and financial records. He laid them across the table. "I've been investigating my brother for years," he said quietly. "Every dollar he stole, every company he crushed, every name he buried, including yours." Lena hesitated, eyes scanning the pages. Her father's name appeared again and again, linked to documents marked confidential. "You kept all this," she whispered. "I kept everything Evan said, and now I have enough proof to expose him, but I cannot do it alone." Her chest tightened. "Why me? Because you are the one person who has nothing left to lose by telling the truth," he said, "and because he will not see it coming from you." The idea made her stomach turn. "You want me to be bait?" He shook his head. "No, I want you to be the voice your father never got to have." Silence filled the room. Lena felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. "If I help you," she said slowly, "what happens after Evan met her eyes? Then the Hartwell name will fall, and maybe both of us can finally breathe again." For the first time since she had met him, she saw something unguarded in his expression. Regret, hope, fear. That night, the rain returned. She lay awake listening to it against the glass, wondering if she was about to make the same mistake her father had, trusting a Hartwell. The following day, the plan began. Lena would deliver a portfolio of her art therapy work to the company headquarters, a gesture that looked harmless enough. Hidden inside were copies of the documents Evan had gathered, proof of Victor's fraud and falsified records. If anything went wrong, the evidence would reach the press automatically. She walked into the Hartwell Group building, with shaking hands, dressed in a simple gray coat. The security guards nodded her through. No one looked twice. Victor Hartwell was waiting in the lobby. His resemblance to Evan was uncanny, but his smile was cold. "Miss Brooks," he said smoothly. "What a surprise." Lena forced a polite smile. "Mr. Hartwell, I am delivering materials for the foundation project." He gestured toward the elevator. "Of course, come in." The ride to the top floor was silent except for the hum of the machine. When the doors opened, the air felt thin. Victor led her to his office and closed the door behind them. "I remember your father," he said suddenly, "a man who believed trust could rebuild anything. Foolish, really." Lena froze. "You ruined him." He smiled, almost proud. "Business is not about fairness, Miss Brooks. It is about survival." Evan never understood that. Before she could reply, the office door burst open. Evan stood there, rain still dripping from his coat, eyes hard with fury. "You do not get to talk about fairness," he said. Victor laughed. "Ah, the prodigal brother returns." Lena stepped back as the brothers faced each other's years of silence breaking in one breath. Evan threw the folder onto the desk. "It is over, Victor. The board has everything. The press will too by morning." Victor's smile faded. "You are willing to destroy the family name for her." Evan's voice was quiet but steady. "I am willing to save it by telling the truth." The storm outside cracked like thunder as security entered the room. Victor's defiance crumbled into disbelief as they led him away. Lena watched speechless. The man who had destroyed her father's life was finally falling. When it was over, Evan turned to her, his eyes heavy. "It will take time," he said softly, "but the truth is free now." She nodded, her throat tight. "So are you." Outside, the rain began to slow, washing the city clean. Now let us return to the moment when guilt turned into redemption, and two people from opposite sides of the same tragedy finally stood on common ground. The following days passed in a blur of headlines and questions. The news broke faster than anyone expected. Hartwell scandal exposed by whistleblower evidence. CEO Victor Hartwell arrested for corporate fraud. Every channel showed the same image, Victor being escorted out of his glass tower in handcuffs, while his brother stood silently behind him. For the first time in years, the Hartwell name was not a symbol of power, but of consequence. And in the center of it all stood Evan and Lena, two people bound by the same wound, now carrying the weight of the truth together. Lena moved out of the mansion a week later. She told Evan she needed time to breathe, to heal, to remember who she was before all of this. He understood. He did not try to stop her. Back in her small apartment, the walls still smelled like turpentine and coffee. She hung one of her unfinished paintings above the window, a new version of the bridge her father once sketched. This time she drew it whole, not broken. She went back to teaching at the art center, back to quiet mornings and paint-stained fingers. But peace did not come easily. Every time she saw a newspaper with the Hartwell name, her chest tightened. Part of her wanted to forget everything. Another part could not. One evening as she was cleaning up after class, she found a familiar envelope on her desk. It had no address, just her name written neatly in black ink. Inside was a single photograph, Evan standing beside his mother, smiling for the first time in what looked like years. Behind them, the garden was filled with new blooms. On the back of the photo, a line was written, "You were right. Some bridges can be rebuilt." She traced the words with her thumb and felt a lump rise in her throat. Maybe this was what forgiveness looked like, not forgetting, but letting go of what could no longer be fixed. Weeks later, she visited the Hartwell estate again. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress. The air was lighter, the halls brighter. Evan met her at the door, dressed casually, a soft smile replacing the guarded expression he once wore. "You look different," she said. "So do you," he replied. "You are glowing." They walked through the garden together. The sound of water from the new fountain filled the silence. It was the first time they had been alone since everything ended. "I came to return something," Lena said, pulling a folded paper from her bag, the letter her father had written. "I think it belongs here." Evan took it carefully, his eye glistening. "He was a better man than I deserved to know." "And you kept his promise," she said. "You built the bridge." He looked at her, voice soft. "Not alone." They stood there for a long moment, the distance between them shrinking with each breath. When she finally turned to leave, he stopped her. "Lena," he said quietly, "you could stay. Not because of guilt, not because of the past, but because I want to know who we could be without it." She hesitated, heart racing. "You are asking me to start over with the man whose name ruined my family." He smiled faintly. "No, I am asking you to start over with the man who learned what love costs." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of rain, the same rain that had brought them together. For the first time, Lena did not feel the storm coming. She felt it pass. Now let us return to the moment when the pain of the past gave way to something unexpected, when forgiveness became more than a word, and love became the quiet answer to everything they had lost. Spring came quietly that year. The city thawed from winter's gray, and for the first time in months, the air smelled like possibility. Lena's art classes grew fuller. Her laughter came easier, and the ache that once shadowed her voice had softened into something gentler. She told herself she was fine, that she had finally closed that chapter of her life. But every time she passed the old bridge near the river, she still thought of Evan Hartwell. He had not called since the day in the garden, but his absence was not empty. It carried the same weight as presence, like a pause before a melody returns. One morning she received a letter in the mail. The envelope was embossed with a new logo she did not recognize. Inside, a formal invitation was written in elegant script. "The Hartwell Foundation cordially invites you to the grand opening of the Rebuild Gallery." At the bottom, a small note in handwriting. "She would know anywhere. Your art built this. I hope you will see what you started." Lena stood on the bridge that evening, holding the invitation in her hands as the sun dipped below the skyline. She thought of her father, of the man who once believed every bridge could be rebuilt, and whispered to herself maybe he was right. The night of the opening arrived. The gallery glowed like a cathedral made of glass and light. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and guests in black tie attire filled the marble lobby. Lena almost turned back at the door. She had never liked crowds, but something in her told her she needed to see this through. Inside, her breath caught. The main hall was lined with artwork from children's art programs funded by the foundation, but in the center of the room stood a single large painting, a bridge spanning across a stormy river, its reflection shimmering beneath it. The signature at the corner read, "L. Brooks." She stepped closer, eyes stinging. A small plaque beneath the painting read, "Dedicated to Henry Brooks, who believed that faith and forgiveness can build what loss once destroyed." Behind her, a familiar voice spoke softly. "He would be proud of you." She turned. Evan stood a few feet away, dressed in a simple suit. No guards, no titles, just a man. "You finished it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "We finished it." For a moment, they simply looked at the painting, the storm captured in color, and the bridge reaching beyond it. "The gallery is not about me," Evan said quietly. "It is about the people my family's choices hurt. I wanted them to have a place to be seen again." Lena smiled faintly. "Then you finally built something your father would have been proud of." Evan's expression softened. "Maybe I built something your father would forgive." They walked together through the gallery, past the lights and the voices, until they reached the terrace overlooking the city. The rain that had threatened earlier now fell in soft drops warm against their skin. Lena looked up at the sky, then back at him. "You could have invited anyone to open this," she said. "Why me?" He met her eyes. "Because none of it would exist without you." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You give me too much credit." "I do not think I give you enough," he replied. The silence that followed was comfortable this time, not the distance of strangers, but the quiet of understanding. As thunder rumbled far away, Evan took a step closer. "Lena, I cannot erase the past, but if you let me, I want to build something real with you." Her heart trembled, but not with fear. She took his hand, the rain between their fingers like a promise unspoken. "Then build it," she said. "Now let us return to the final moment when every bridge that had once been broken finally led them home, to forgiveness, to love, and to the peace they had both been searching for all along." The rain stopped just before dawn. A soft mist drifted over the city, turning every streetlight into a halo. On the terrace of the gallery, Lena and Evan stood side by side, watching the first light spill across the skyline. Neither spoke for a long time. It was enough just to breathe in the same quiet, to feel the weight that had once separated them finally lift. Weeks passed, and the world around them began to move forward. The story of the Hartwell scandal slowly faded from headlines, replaced by newer names and fresher chaos. But within the city, something lasting remained. The Hartwell Foundation rebuilt not just its reputation, but its purpose. The programs expanded, new art centers opened, and every child who picked up a paintbrush carried a piece of Lena's lesson that beauty could grow from ruin. Lena kept teaching, her days filled with laughter and color again, but her life no longer felt small. She visited the gallery often, not for the fame it brought, but for the reminder that change was possible. The painting of the bridge hung there permanently, surrounded by photographs of children smiling beside their own art. Every time she looked at it, she thought of her father. She thought of the storm that had once destroyed everything, and of the man who helped her learn to build again. One afternoon, Evan found her standing there. He had traded his tailored suits for rolled-up sleeves and paint on his hands. "I started helping with the classes," he said, smiling. "Turns out I'm terrible at painting." She laughed softly. "Then you finally found something you cannot control." "Maybe that is a good thing," he said. "Control got me here in the first place." They walked through the gallery together, the sound of children's voices echoing faintly in the background. When they reached the main hall, Evan stopped and turned to her. "Lena, there is one last thing I need to do," he said. He led her outside to the edge of the river, where construction crews were finishing the last sections of a new pedestrian bridge. Its steel arches curved elegantly over the water, gleaming in the light. A bronze plaque at its entrance read, "The Brooks Hartwell Bridge," a promise to rebuild what was lost. Lena covered her mouth, eyes filling with tears. "You built this." He nodded. "We built this. It is the bridge your father designed before the merger. I found the blueprints in the old files. I wanted it to exist, not just in drawings." She stepped closer, tracing her fingers over the plaque. "He would have loved this." Evan looked at her, voice low and steady. "Then I did it right." They stood together, watching the reflection of the bridge shimmer on the water. People walked across it laughing, living unaware of the history beneath their feet. Evan took her hand, his thumb brushing over her skin like a quiet vow. "I cannot change the past, Lena, but I can choose what comes next, and I want that to be with you." She turned to him, her smile trembling but certain. "You already rebuilt the bridge. Maybe now it is time to cross it. He laughed softly, relief and emotion blending in his voice. Then let us cross it together. They walked forward step by step as the morning light broke fully over the water. The city around them woke the air alive with new beginnings. And as they reached the other side, Lena realized something her father had always known. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is choosing to build again. Now, if you have ever stood at the edge of your own broken bridge, wondering if it was worth rebuilding, remember this story. Sometimes love does not arrive to erase the past, it arrives to give it meaning.